Okay, just before we go into this tutorial today, just a couple of things that I've found out in the last few days. One thing is this. I've got this scene up on my synth. That's the machine on the right here, Polyend Synth. And if I hold shift down and sustain a note, this is just a one synth scene. So I'm going to hold shift, sustain that. Now I can actually play over that. If I want to add more sustained notes, that long as I've got the polyphony, if we look at the synth setting, I've got 5 voices on that, so I'm fine. I can hold shift and add a note to that. Now I've got 2 notes playing. I can change those sustained notes, hold shift, press that one, lose that one, replace it with another one, and then obviously if you sort out a scene that's only got one voice, you can use that voice in another scene as long as you save the voice. So if I go to engine here, so if I go to save, I could save this as harmonium or whatever I want to call this, or Leslie's pad or whatever. I could load that into a scene that's got 3 synths in it, even though I've set it up as a 1 synth scene. Now, one thing I noticed this morning was I was getting a lot of CPU overload. So if you've got a synth like this that's got a lot of voices, 8 voices, you may find that you get CPU overload. In other words, the machine can't cope, and you'll get crackling and popping. So to remedy that, just take the voices down. So this one here, I'll take it down to 3. You know, you'll find that will help. It's a problem with these machines. I've seen a lot of people complaining about this online, so watch out for that, but that's a way to get around that, lower the amount of voices per synth. Right, so the main subject of today's tutorial is Midi, and you can't help but notice that I've got 2 Polyend devices here, the Polyend Play and the Polyend Synth. Polyend Play on the left here, and I was one of those unfortunate people that bought the Polyend Play on the day that the Polyend Play Plus came out. So although I got it second hand at what I thought was a really good price, unfortunately I got rather stung. It's nobody's fault, but I was a bit unhappy about it at the time, but never mind. It's still a great machine. I'm planning some tutorials on it. And maybe, you never know, Polyend might send me a Polyend Play Plus to do some tutorials on. But for the moment, anyway, I have the Polyend Play, and I've midied it to the Polyend Synth with this very simple lead here, which is the TRS to TRS. So this is a Boss lead. This, you might be able to see that it says BCC1. I think that says 3535, and it's just TRS to TRS, and that works really well. So I'm going to show you first of all how I MIDI these 2 machines together. So just go to the Polyend Play for a moment. I'm going to go to the MIDI side of things and just mute these 3 voices. So on the Play, I've just got this really basic drum pattern. The Play is a very capable machine. I'm not going to go into that today, but just for the sake of argument, this is my drum machine that I am going to trigger some notes on the Polyend Synth. So that's the Polyend Play side of it. If I go into MIDI on this machine, there's nothing that you need to set, because I'm not triggering the clock of the other machine. It's simply sending notes at the moment. So that's alright. If I go into the MIDI of the Polyend Synth, again, I don't really have to set anything at all. None of this needs changing. So I've got this scene on my Polyend Synth called Play plus Synth. I'm going to call that one up. Now this is going to talk to the Polyend Play. So if I just mute this Polyend Play for a minute, I'll do it on here. Mute those 3 tracks. I'm going to hold Shift and Patterns Audio MIDI, and that takes me to the MIDI side. The MIDI side of the Polyend Play is indicated by these magenta pads. So this pattern I've made here on the Play is going to send out notes to the Polyend Synth. Now if I select this first track here and press this sample button, it says jack channel 1. This one, jack channel 2, this one, jack channel 3. That indicates the MIDI channel that those notes are being sent out of via this jack. You see, jack channel 1, jack channel 2, jack channel 3. So if I go to synths on the Polyend Synth, you can see that the blue synth is receiving on jack 1, the yellow is on jack 2, and the magenta on jack number 3. MIDI in and out. Obviously this is MIDI in, MIDI out from the Polyend Play into MIDI in. So I've got this triggering this blue synth. I've got this second pattern here triggering the yellow synth. This one here. See, because that is jack channel 2. And this one, which is on MIDI channel 3, jack channel 3, will be triggering the magenta synth. And on this one, on the chance, it's 80% chance of a random note. So it's a bit of nonsense really. So if I unsolo all of those, you'll hear all three at once. Not terribly musical, I'll grant you. But, you know, it's getting the job done. So if I hold Shift and Patterns Audio MIDI, okay, and unmute these three tracks that are playing on the play itself, we'll have the two machines playing together. So the Polyend Play is playing this little drum pattern and triggering these notes on the Polyend Synth, like this. Now you can do some stuff on the Polyend Play to affect things on the Polyend Synth. So if I go to the MIDI side of things on the Polyend Play by holding Shift and this Patterns button, so now on the MIDI side, these are the notes that are being sent out to the Polyend Synth. Go into Performance mode, select these three tracks that are sending out, press play. I can retune. That. What else can I do? I can change the filters. It's only the Polyend Synth that's being affected. The actual play tracks are not selected. The bit crash doesn't work. This works. Reorganize. Okay, this repeat works. But what I'll do, I'll go over to stop this one. Let's go over here and we'll mute the three Polyend Play tracks. Go back to MIDI. And all this stuff is working, whether you like that or not is another matter. But you can use the performance mode to stop that. A lot of these encoders on the Play are set to CC numbers, so you can map those CC numbers to what's going to be received on the Polyend Synth. I'm not going to go too deeply into that, just want to show you can sync one to the other. You can get the synth's sequence or ARP to play in time with the Play if you set the clock out on the Play to MIDI out jack. So let's go to the MIDI. So set the clock out on the Polyend Play to MIDI out jack, and the clock in on the synth to MIDI in jack. Let's get an arpeggiator working on something. Let's go to the... So if I just set this going, and I can change the tempo of the arpeggiator here. With the tempo control of the Play, which is quite cool, isn't it? Right, I can plug a MIDI keyboard into the MIDI in of the synth to play the notes of the device. So I'll set that all up and come back to you. In my last demonstration I had the clock in set to Midi and jack on the Polyend Synth. Got to set the back to internal, click, come out. Now this is a 3 synth scene. On this Arturia Keystep 37 I've got a standard 5-pin DIN MIDI lead coming out, going into one of the Polyend adapters, takes it down to the TRS MIDI in. So this keyboard is talking to this synth. On the Arturia, if you hold shift and the first key on the left hand side, that means you're transmitting on, bring the octave down. So I'm now playing the blue synth on the Arturia. Anyway, that's that sound, the blue synth. So if I hold shift and the next key up, that's C sharp, I'm now got octave up. I'm now playing the yellow synth. And if I hold shift and the D, number 3 here, it's lit up blue as you can see. I'm now playing the magenta synth on MIDI channel 3. And if you look at the synths, you can see that blue, yellow, magenta, MIDI, in, out, in, out, in, out, jack 1, jack 2, jack 3. I've turned the sequencer off on the magenta synth and now I'm just playing the normal notes. That's how you play the sounds of the Polyend Synth from an external keyboard. A lot of people have this Arturia. It's an amazing machine. I must confess I haven't learnt it as well as I should have done, but it is great. I mean, I can do pitch bend on there, things like that, change the octave, you know, you get the general idea. So that's just a very quick look at the MIDI setup with the Polyend Synth as used with the Polyend Play and an external keyboard. Obviously there are probably lots of other MIDI applications that I haven't dealt with, but that gives you just a general overview of how to use it with MIDI. So that concludes, I think, my series of tutorials on the Polyend Synth in a kind of basic way, so that anyone picking this machine up can get up and running fairly quickly. And obviously, you know, you can dive deeper yourself. I hope to be doing that in subsequent weeks. There are lots of really good videos on this machine out on YouTube already. I'm by no means unique here, but hopefully this has been of some use to you. If it has, please consider liking all these videos I've done and subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much for watching, and you'll see me in my next video.